Good morning, everybody, and welcome to episode 82 of the Coffee Squad podcast. So last week we talked about the importance of building a good plan, with Andy, and he went through the Las Vegas shoot. It was a really good episode, got a lot of good feedback. So now we're going to kind of talk about the after effect and building that business continuity plan. So good morning, Jake. How you doing?
Good, bud. I think like these episodes, as we're planning them out and you're planning them out and doing them, it definitely makes sense. What I call like the flash to bang and then recovery. I think Andy's information last week was awesome. It was critical. And this week, it's like, how do you recover? Yeah, some good stuff. Good stuff. Good job. I'm digging the hat backwards, a more relaxed look. Look at you.
I've been knocking stuff out. Again, haven't had time to do my hair this morning, so I just throw it on and.
Gotcha. It's like the walk of shame, but the hair of shame.
Yeah, there you go. So. All right, so where are we at? Business continuity. Let's hop into this. Well, what are you drinking this morning? We'll do that real quick, and then we'll head on out to.
I'm just drinking the normal, like the probiotic little like zero sugar little drink and a little tea. Man. So kids are starting to get, I don't know if it's allergies or cold, but
it's that change of season sniffles.
Yeah. So traveling, I don't know. You feel like that, there's nothing worse right now than coughing.
Everybody looks like
coughing on an airplane. Like my lungs are already jacked, so like dry air always affects me. So whenever I sit on an airplane, like the dry air kills me. But listening to or watching people like look at me like, oh man, did you get COVID? Am I sitting next to a COVID guy? It's like, nope. I get tested quite frequently. I do all my travels and the vaccine, but still.
It reminds me of, growing up, you read or you heard about the leopard colonies, leprosy, right?
Mm-hmm.
People, it kind of, you cough and people start, oh my God, it's pointing at you like he's got the COVID, get away.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It's weird, but yeah, so that's, I don't know, as it starts getting colder here too, I actually like a warm, like tea in the morning. So,
okay.
Mm-hmm. What are you drinking?
I'm drinking another sparkling water, the grapefruit. I'm kind of digging that grapefruit sparkling water. That's like my go-to. Then I've got a Reveille from One Nation Coffee. That place down in South Carolina. I got some of their stuff recently, so I'm drinking it again. I go back and forth from different brands, and I like these guys. We had them on a few last year talking about their stuff and. Yep. Veteran owned, Leo owned, supportive of both. So, you can't go wrong with it.
Yeah. So, well, good, man. Good. I'm glad you're supporting kind of like a local. I mean, look, One Nation Coffee, we all love them. We all love their ads. We all love what they stand for. But, supporting like small local is also a good time too.
Yeah. All right, so let's hop into this. Last week, we talked about having a good security plan. So now we're going to talk about the after effects of what happens and how to plan for that. So let's kind of jump in. And what is a business continuity plan, Jake?
I mean, simplest terms, it's just the capability of an organization to continue to deliver their products or services that's at a predefined level of acceptance following an incident, some type of disruptive incident. So I think that is the simplest terms of what it is. It's a process of creating systems of prevention and what the recovery looks like when there's a threat to the company. And these threats can be anything. You see, cyber attacks.
I was just thinking about the oil or the gas crisis a few months ago.
Yeah, ransomware, right? How do they respond to that? What's their backup plan? What's their response plan? I mean, and in this plan, it's not just one or two things. It's a whole list. And each company is different. So each company, we talked last week about check the block, things that security and that some people do in the security industry. This is not one of those check the block things. This is one that should be a comprehensive review of the company, understanding what they do, what they provide, assets within the company, assets outside the company, how that's going to affect it. You look at media, social media, how that could play a role into it. Cyber, physical, employees. So this plan is pretty in depth, and it's not a one shoe fits all type of plan that you can use.
I know I can only speak on small businesses, but I don't know how big corporations are. But I'd say the majority of small businesses don't have a continuity plan built out for what happens after the fact. They just kind of take it as they come. So it's something that even as a small business owner, you should be aware of and have something laid out. So if whether it's a natural disaster or a public image or whatever, you should have something laid out on how you're going to respond and how you should respond.
And all that goes into your business continuity plan.
Yep.
Look, everything is online these days. So if your storefront gets hacked, payments processes, there should be a plan for that. There should be a plan, workplace violence, active shooter type stuff. Chemical industries, gas, oil industries, if there's a spill or something gets out or something goes boom, have a response for that. You should have a response. And again, we talk about the what if scenarios, right? So have scenarios that are realistic, and have responses for those realistic scenarios. And then the most catastrophic. If you can plan for the most catastrophic event that'll affect your company or your organization in the most negative and harmful way, that is what you should plan for, because everything else you can kind of build off of that plan if it's if it covers everything. So.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. So we've already discussed this a little bit, but why is it so important to have this plan built out and in place?
I would say the biggest thing is making sure your organization or your business survives.
Yeah.
If an emergency or crisis happens, whether that's due to human error, nefarious activities, natural disasters, pandemic, social media image or media image, whatever that is, that affects your company in such a huge, critical way, it's to survive. That's at the end of the day, survival of the company.
I have a feeling that not a lot of businesses had the pandemic contingency in place in their continuity plan. I don't think anybody really prepared for this. Some people maybe, but restaurants and service industry professions, I don't think really thought about these lockdowns.
And quite frankly, how could they? When was the last time the country was shut down? Not just the country, right? The world shut down.
Was it the Spanish flu in 1918? So
that's now it will be. Now it will be part of these plans. And a lot of companies, like I said, they do a check the block, a quick thing, but it's never really done in depth. Some do a really, really good job. Some of your oil, gas companies do a great job. Your airlines do a phenomenal job. Kind of your more high risk companies do a great job. And then I'd say your everyday companies, it's a thought. It's kind of a check the block. Yes, we did it, and then put it in the safe. So just like any plan, any security type plan, your business continuity plan should definitely be included in there, and it should be reviewed. It should be reviewed yearly, in my opinion.
Well, it's essentially a giant book that says, if X happens, this is YZ is what you do type thing, right? So,
and it's not always going to be perfect,
nothing's ever perfect.
But it's a plan. It's a starting place. It's something you've thought about. The worst time to create something and do something is during the middle of a crisis. You're not going to have the time. You're not going to have the energy. You're not going to have the clarity of mind to do it. And that's where a lot of companies, in my opinion, get in trouble. They haven't thought about this before. The crap happens, and now they're just chasing and racing, and then the finger point starts happening and everything else. So, plan is best. Like we always say, before an event happens. The time spent planning is never wasted, and that time that you spend planning and going over and rehearsing is honestly, in my opinion, very well spent, as it allows the company to get back and function a lot faster than others who are just kind of wading through the mud, trying to figure out what to do next. And that's most companies that do that are the ones that usually don't recover or have a very hard time recovering and have a long, if it's an incident that makes it to the media and on social media, you have a long time cleaning up that image.
Oh yeah, it's definitely something that is a preemptive thing you need to do. It's not something like you said you want to do after the fact.
So go ahead.
I was going to say, so what do you do to kind of start building one? What are some things that like you should kind of look for and think about?
I mean, I'll just give tips. Look, if you're in the security industry and you are the security manager for a company or an organization or a consultant like we are, understand what the company is, what they do, and how they do it. Understand the nuts and bolts of that company. If you don't understand it, ask questions. Understand what makes them function.
Make sure they don't use a cookie cutter approach is one thing
I
would say.
Yeah, just literally like go through detail. Talk to the operations. I say this quite a lot. Talk to the operations. Understand what they need and how it affects them. I can tell you, if you look at Texas this past winter and the freeze that happened, how that affected chemical companies, oil and gas industry. Huge, right? When was the last time, basically the whole state froze? And what did it do? What did it do to the pipes that are running through these factories, the cooling systems that are running through, the water systems? When those were frozen, the pipes broke. What did that do? Certain clients of ours lost tens of millions of dollars a day because the plants weren't functioning for 2 to 3 weeks, and parts of the plants, back in May, were still recovering because of the damage that was done. And so, how does that happen? If you're lucky and you have a multinational or international company where you can push stuff to another site or facility to pick up the load for a little while, that's great. Other companies aren't as fortunate. Look, we live on the East Coast, hurricanes. If you're a single entity here on the East Coast or the Gulf Coast where, a hurricane strikes and it destroys your business, what do you do then? Do you have a backup plan? Do you have backup? Do you run it out of your house? How do you do it? And so that's with any natural disaster, is having that backup plan. Where can you shift resources to still get a product out or still provide a service?
I know one thing that's kind of popped up recently is supply chain issues, and I don't know really how you plan for that. Maybe you have more insight on it, but like you look at the ports of entry right now, they're backed up with all these container ships waiting to get offloaded, and things are just backed up more and more. And, they're talking about order stuff now because it might not even get here before Christmas or whatever, however you're doing things.
I just read an article about Costco is hiring ships to go transport stuff for them specifically. They're not waiting so much on the ports. I don't know how they're going to get around that because you still need a port.
You still have to offload, right? Yeah.
On offload. However, there's supply chain management software. There's supply management, chain management tools and techniques that you can use. I'm not in the supply chain industry. I understand it a little bit, but again, you look at COVID and the pandemic and the second, third order and beyond effects of shutting down and doing stuff. To me, I find it weird and strange. Last year, I went out to LA before COVID hit, after COVID hit, and I was just recently out there end of July, and the ships, the ports, Long Beach and LA port, there's more ships now backed up than they were last year during the height of COVID, and it's only getting worse. I think I read an article last night or the other day, and I was actually watching the U.S. Open Surf Championship in Huntington Beach. Is where I go a lot. So, and seeing ships literally in the channel there waiting, backed up is interesting. I'm getting ready to do the channel crossing here in a few weeks, and so that's something we have to deal with is navigating around those ships.
Yeah.
It's definitely a mess. So again, looking at your supply chain management, where are they coming from? How are you getting them? Is there an alternative? Do you spend more money and you go outside of the sphere of Asia and go more local? Are those resources being pulled? So
I think it's something you have to understand, the cascading effect. If you get your material from China or India or another country and they're on, let's say, a strict lockdown or something happens and they can't provide that material, do you have a backup plan to get that material from somebody else? Yeah, the cost may be more. And do you pass it on to the consumer? Or, I mean, those are all things you need to think
I
about when
mean,
you're building it out.
let's talk about car chips, right?
Yeah.
The price of new and used cars. Used cars have been soaring. I mean, I sold my truck
I know.
for quite a bit of money because I work from home a lot, and when I do travel, I just need a little car to get me to and from the airport. Otherwise, my vehicle sits in the driveway here and collects sap and dust. So, the vehicle chips. That's a crisis. That's a major shortage right now. You have plants shutting down across the U.S. because they cannot keep up with the supply and demand. And then what does that do? That raises the price of new and used cars through the roof. And, everything else follows. So I think we've kind of hit on the pandemic and the supply chain stuff. Other things I would look at, a lot of people don't think about is your image and your reputation.
Yeah.
Everyone has a smartphone today. Everyone records. You can't watch. There's a shooting at the World Surf event in Huntington Beach over the weekend. Within minutes, I had friends shooting me video of that shooting incident, of what happened. And that's a spontaneous thing, like most of these events are.
Yeah.
They're a spontaneous thing. But the image and the reputation, if you're a major company that already has kind of a target on your back, let's say you're
think about last week to the Andes conversation. So
yeah, MGM, what was their image reputation after the fact? How do they handle it? And so to me, these are where your public affairs officials, whether it's a company or government, they should be prepared. And this goes part of your business continuity plan of dealing with the media and having a response on social media. I kind of learned this through my time in the military. Actions on a target, on an objective of what the enemy would put out versus what we put out. And usually, look, we're in their turf, their field, their culture, and they knew how to play that image very well.
Yeah.
And how we suffered for years and years and years. So we finally figured out kind of, and I'm not saying you do this in business, but if you get
the correct psyops,
well, get the correct message out.
Yeah.
Get the correct message out and try to get it out there first. The CYA mentality of the past, in my opinion, it's not helpful. And people are going to see it. They're going to research it. There's enough videos. There's enough cameras. There's enough information out there for people to pick it apart. And so have your public affairs and your social media experts be prepared. The worst case scenarios and these responses, have pre-script responses for the media, and not just have them in a binder. So, XYZ event happens, you pull out your media response binder, and the executives and your public affairs are actually out there on the same message.
Yeah.
But plan for it. Also, you can have a plan with any plan, but if you don't train and don't review it and don't use those plans and plan for it, they're useless, because you're going to have someone stumbling and mumbling, kind of like how I sound on this podcast sometimes, all over the place, who you won't have a clear, concise, crisp message. And that's what people are looking for.
I don't want to get too political, but you think about the last 2 years with even the COVID response, it's at times has been very vague and unclear. And I think that's part of the problem, because if you don't have that clear message, if you don't have that clear, concise, what you're going to do, what you want to do, people read into it. They start looking into it. Nowadays, I think the best policy is to be open and honest as possible, and be as straightforward as possible when it comes to things like this.
And if you don't know, you don't know.
Yeah.
You don't have to have an answer for everything, but you should provide a response in a timely fashion.
Hey, I don't know that at this time. We are working on it. We will let you know as soon as possible. There's nothing wrong with that.
I think if you look at the airlines, this is a good kind of, the public affairs and the social media. You look at airlines, with this mask policy, and people, not just the mask, but unruly. We'll call them unruly passengers. I don't care what your thoughts are on COVID, whether a mask, no mask, vaccine. I don't care. Flying is a privilege. And so It's a private entity
Yep.
that if you decide to fly, comply with their rules. I don't agree with it all, but if I want to fly, I do what they ask. And so just the unruly passengers. And now again, everyone has their phone, and the social media and just the public affairs department of these airlines, to me, what a horrible job. Constantly
Yeah.
day in and day out. I'm sure there's images if you're on Twitter or any of the other social media stuff that if you subscribe to their stuff, you'll probably see people. Probably, I'm just throwing a ballpark and a guess out there of probably hundreds of complaints and like bad PR that's out there because of whether it's a crappy flight attendant, which there are, crappy ticket agent, whatever it is, people are going to complain. You're going to have videos out there. So again, the airlines, I think, do a really good job of sometimes, not all the time, of having these pre-responses. Could they be better at times? Absolutely. But having them. And so for a business, large or small, have these responses, even a government entity, high schools, if they're, there's a school shooting or something else, happens. There's a likelihood of a school shooting or some type of massive event happening at a school, just based on the data. Now, the probability is very small, but be prepared. If you're in charge, if you're the principal, or you work in the district leadership, be prepared for those types of incidents.
And when kids are involved, it gets heated quickly. So be prepared for a lot of questions and a lot of heat.
And lives. Anytime there's a loss of life, if there's catastrophic injuries, be prepared. And then your employees, how prepared are they? Part of the plan. So in part of your plan, you should look at employees. How do they feel? What are they going to say to the media and the social media? Yeah. You can't put a gag order on your employees just speaking bad after an incident. So think about, employee relationships. Were they prepared? How are they prepared? And that should go into your continuity plan. Not just prepared, but then if you look at Sony Pictures back in 2000, was that 4 or 14? I can't remember. When they got hacked, their emails were shut down for months. And so when you look at employees, it's not just how they're going to react, but are they allowed to do their job? Can they do their job? Can they function due to whatever crisis happened? And then how are you dealing with that as a company? How are you bringing them back on? How are you getting them reintegrated? If it was, due to some source of violence, are you going to have psychologists on hand? Are you going to give them time off? That kind of stuff. We talked about material and production. We gave the Texas freeze example. Looking at that, understanding, how you're going to be able to produce or provide a product or service to the company. Financial, we haven't spoke about this. Financially, look at your insurance policies.
Yeah.
I would say most insurance companies now, with your general liability, for depending on the size and what the risk is, you can get cyber insurance. And so if you're hacked or there's ransomware, there's up to a certain amount that insurance companies will pay out. And check it out.
Remember we had Alec talking about infrastructure hack a few months ago, and they will ask for just under the insurance premium. Yep, they know.
Yeah. So these are all points and discussions to have that you should definitely consider in your business continuity plan. Technology, what's your cyber guy doing? How are they doing? Is it backup? Is there repeaters? Do you have your critical information stored somewhere separate off of the internet so that you can bring it back up? Do you have a separate system that you can flip the switch on? Do you have redundancies in your system, in your security system? How many switches? Is there one for the inside, one for the outside of your cameras? Can you swap those switches if something were to happen for all your security hardware? So again, there's so many pieces that go into a business continuity plan. It's not just one of those things that you just sit down. It can take weeks to plan, get the executive team in there. Everyone that has a critical role and part of the company should be part of that discussion, should be part of that plan. And then again, make it as simple and concise as possible.
It's a complex piece of work that we want you to make as simple as possible. I mean,
it's going to be several pages long. However, not one person is going to be in charge of it. If it's cyber thing, the cyber person, picks that up.
Yeah.
The media person, the executives, all that. Everyone has a role. Kind of like Andy said, with the Las Vegas shooting, they had a plan. They briefed the plan. Everyone understood their roles, and when the crisis happened, everyone did their role.
Yeah. And that's what goes in. I mean, that all this kind of builds together. We talk about security by layers, and how everything kind of goes together. This is the same thing. You have the pre-planning for what happens before and during the event. You have to also have the planning what happens after a major event. If it's bad or good.
Yep.
And I think about like the people up in Seattle and Portland and stuff with the peaceful protests and that got out of hand and stuff like that. How many people were planned for that prior to it? So there's lots of change over the last couple of years.
And it's kind of constantly change. You can't predict everything. You're not going to be able to predict everything. Again, having a well thought out plan and having a continuity plan to react to that is much better than not having one. I also think a good business continuity plan will help everyone at the executive level and operations level understand, or will provide them a better understanding of how the business actually works, and the risks that they face and the things that they need to do in order to recover. And I think that's a very beneficial tool when creating a continuity plan.
Absolutely. So I think one thing we should talk a little bit about before we go is training your people to implement this type of stuff. I think training's a big part of it, and you have to keep them up to date on any changes or anything that's changed and anything that needs to be changed as far as your plan goes.
Yeah, I mean, training with any plan, rehearsing any plan is critical in my opinion. I had a buddy who ran an active shooter. He's a CSO of a pretty large company and ran an active shooter training scenario, and he did blanks. And that didn't go so well. So understanding your environment, understanding the training. So make it as realistic as possible, but also like each organization within the organization or sub-organization should understand what their role is. And so you can have security consultants and people who specialize in creating these scenarios. Make sure that you tell them exactly what you want, what that threat is and how they want that scenario to be done, and then have them evaluate. And that is all from the president CEO all the way down to the lowest person should be evaluated. How do they respond? What jobs do they do? What they do good? What they do? What needs improvement? And based off that, after you've already built your continuity plan, that's where you can find out what holes you have and how to fix them.
Yeah. I mean, you think about even something as simple as like a flood or a hurricane. I mean, it's not simple. It can be devastating, but if you have a business that is worked, you're normally there, but you can do stuff remotely. Do you have the systems in place to handle that? Setting up your virtual offices and stuff like that. All that should go into your planning for stuff that happens. And then you should make sure you can implement it. Because I know certain companies weren't really necessarily prepared for the increase of work at home stations after this pandemic. And they had some cyber issues and stuff like that. So
absolutely. And then, if you look at flooding and hurricanes, usually most people live and work probably within 30 miles ish of where they are. So if it's flooding, think about if it happened there, the likelihood, depending on the terrain, your other employees might be flooded and not have access to it. Generators. A lot of people like to put their generators in their basement or their lower levels, and heating air, the same thing. That's your backup power supply. In my opinion, those should be on the roof. So they actually turn on and work when you need them to work during a flood. So just little stuff like that. Again, there isn't a cookie cutter approach to a business continuity plan. You can find plans on the internet, and that's fine. It's a start, but use those plans, whatever you find, and custom create them to your organization, to your business, and then understand how your business will be affected. And pick the most likely worst case scenario, not the worst case scenario, the most likely worst case scenario.
Yeah, that's all good advice. And like you're saying, you can find stuff online. It's a check the block. I like to think of that as a good starting point. use that as your guideline, but expand and customize it to your business or your corporate, or the business you're doing work for.
100%.
Awesome. Well, I mean, this is a short episode. It's short and sweet, to the point. Anything else you want to talk about before we head out for the day?
How are those Seahawks doing?
They play. I don't know. We'll find out. The game's coming up. So.
Yeah. So, well, cool, man.
Not so good this year.
I don't know. Yeah. Anyways, reach out to us at the Coffee Squad Podcast. Reach out to Freedom Consulting if you have questions. If you want tips and tricks, more than happy to help out and provide some answers.
All right, everybody. Appreciate you listening. Don't forget to check out the YouTube channel at youtube.com. Search the Coffee Squad Podcast, or you can go to coffeesquadpodcast.com and you can find all of our content and follow us there. We will catch you all next week. Thanks.
Have a good one.